Hello and welcome to another episode of the Bubbs on Sports podcast. Today is Wednesday, January 24th. Hope everyone's having a good day so far. We've got a lot to get into today on the Bubbs on Sports program here on a Wednesday, coming off of a packed night last night in the world of sports, especially in the world of New York sports, as you had all teams in action last night. The Islanders hosting the Vegas Golden Knights. You had the Rangers wrapping up their West Coast trip against the San Jose Sharks. And then you had the Nets and the Knicks, the Battle of New York in basketball at the Barclays Center in Brooklyn. Although, while watching the game, and I'm sure many of you that were in the building last night probably felt like you were at the Garden for a good portion of that game as the Knicks win, and they do so with a whole lot of Knicks fan support inside the Barclays Center last night, and another brutal loss for the Brooklyn Nets. We'll start with that today. We'll also get into the Rangers and their recent struggles. I also want to get to the Islanders and their hiring of Patrick Roy as their new head coach after firing Lane Lambert, which was much needed, something that was probably long overdue. It's kind of funny. It feels a lot like the Chargers and Brandon Staley. I think a lot of Islanders fans were calling for it last year. It was probably something that should have been done in the offseason. They waited probably an extra 40-plus games to fire him, but they finally fired him. They finally made the move, and they bring in Patrick Roy, well-respected guy, obviously one of the best goaltenders in the National Hockey League all time. They bring him in, sense of accountability. And now, all of a sudden, the arrow is beginning to point up a little bit for the Islanders for this year, potentially making a playoff push, but also in years to come, because this is a team that desperately needs a push in the right direction after their recent coaching debacle, moving on from Lane Lambert. But, you go into last night, and obviously, I'm a Kentucky fan as well, so Kentucky was on. And, it's like 6:50, and I'm sitting down, I'm getting ready. I'm like, this is going to be a great night. You got Kentucky on at 7 Eastern. You got the Nets on at 7:30 Eastern, and you got the Rangers on at 10:30, which is crazy. Watch a little bit of the game, but pretty much after that, you record it, watch the highlights. That's what I do anyway. And there wasn't really much to take away from that game. Rangers blow another game to the worst team in the NHL, which is beyond pathetic, and we'll get to them here in a little bit. But, as we transition into the Nets and the Knicks, I'm thinking to myself, I think it's going to be a great night. I got all three of these sports teams on. During January and February and even portions of March, these nights become long. They're long because you don't have Monday Night Football. You don't have Thursday Night Football. You don't have college football on Saturday. You don't have any of those college football games on Friday. And you really don't have many, even some of the MAC games that come on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. During February, January, it is a very boring time for sports during the week. Weekends are packed, but sports during the week, it's boring. Now, you still have college basketball, but it's just not the same all the time as watching a Monday Night Football game or a Thursday Night Football game, because obviously the NFL is king. But last night was one of the nights where all three of my teams are in action. It doesn't happen all the time. All three of the teams are in action. They're all lined up 7, 7:30, 10:30. You're getting ready to watch them, and they all lose. And last night was one of those nights as a sports fan where it happens. You walk away some nights. You walk away with all your teams winning. When baseball starts, you'll get, NBA, NHL, you get the playoffs for both those leagues, and you'll get baseball. And there'll be nights where I walk away and the Nets, Rangers, and Yankees will all win. And then there's going to be nights where they all lose. And last night was one of those nights. Kentucky loses to South Carolina, so they lose to an unranked team. The Nets blow a lead at home against the Knicks, so they lose to the Knicks again. And then the Rangers lose to the worst team in the NHL in overtime 3-2, and they blow another 2-0, or they blow another lead. So that was pretty much the sports night last night for me, to sum it up. But, that's the beauty of sports, as they always say. You get another opportunity. That's the beauty of baseball, football, or baseball, hockey, basketball. You get another opportunity to do it either the next day or at least 2 days later, a couple days later. Unlike football, where you got to wait an entire week to get your team to, see your team again, unless if it's obviously a Thursday night game. But even that's, 3-4 days. So either way, last night turned out to be a pretty unsuccessful night. All three losing and losing in pretty poor fashion as well. And that's where we start here with the Nets. Now, many of you that are watching this are Knicks fans. You probably couldn't care less about the Nets. Obviously, I'm a Net fan. It's been a brutal season. It's been, be honest with you, it's one of the worst seasons I can remember. Now, I don't mean that in terms of so much the losing aspect, because we've done a lot more losing in previous seasons. But in terms of how we're losing these games, it's one of the most painful seasons I've ever sat through, because we're losing games just like we did last night so much. It's so often. It's almost happening every other game where we are blowing leads in the fourth quarter, down the stretch, missing big shots, and losing games because of it. Poor coaching all the way top down, from Jacques Vaughn to all the way down to the players on the floor. It has been a complete disaster in the fourth quarter and late game situations. And for those of you that caught the game last night on national television, you got a pretty good look at what us Net fans have dealt with this entire season. And that's what makes it so painful, is because we've had so many opportunities to win games this year. This team could be we could be having a completely different conversation right now if the Nets would close out these games. I mean, there is just 5 games in the month of January that the Nets have blown leads in, that have lost games. It's only January, and January's been a debacle. It's like fast forward, get us to February. But from a Knicks point of view, last night was a really good night for them. You know, they started out a little slow. Nets obviously were playing good basketball there for a while, go into the fourth quarter with a 9-point lead. But, you know, when the Knicks made a trade a couple weeks ago for OG Anunoby, sending, obviously, R.J. Barrett and Emmanuel quickly over to the Toronto Raptors. Of course, the reunion was a couple days ago where Toronto came into New York to play the Knicks. Knicks took care of business at home against the Raptors, but people were kind of wondering how they would look. And ever since they got Anunoby, they've looked really good. They played really well. And then Anunoby's defense has been very good. He's not a big offensive guy. He's kind of a 3-and-D type player. Didn't go off last night, 3 of 8 from the field for a total of 10 points. But Julius Randle and Jalen Brunson are dominant. And I don't watch the Knicks every night. Of course, Net Ranger fan, so I'm not somebody, you guys know that I'm not somebody that watches the Knicks every night. But last night, seeing the Knicks put up 60 with their top 2 stars show you that this team can go deep in the postseason. Now, they do need scoring depth, but there's been a lot of criticism over the years about Julius Randle, inconsistent sometimes, you know, struggling in the postseason at times. But the thing with Julius Randle is he plays every game. He's out there. He's going to put up 30, 40 minutes. He's going to be out there. He's going to be reliable. He's going to be on the court. He's going to produce. He might be inconsistent at time. He might not always show up in the biggest moments, but he's going to produce. He's going to help you win, and he's not going to take days off. He's not going to rest. He's going to be out there every day, every night. And you also saw just the brilliance of Jalen Brunson and the chemistry between those two guys. Brunson's turning into a legitimate number 1 option. And it all matters when the postseason comes around, because a regular season win against the Nets is not going to change the season, not going to all of a sudden make you a title contender because you beat the Brooklyn Nets. But seeing what those two could do last night, dishing the basketball to each other, obviously putting up 30 apiece. And this is a team right now that is winning with very little bench depth. They got nothing out of their bench yesterday. They haven't really gotten much out of their bench. Their leading scorer, Miles McBride, had 8 points last night. That was their leading scorer on their bench. They're not a very bench-deep team. That is because they traded away R.J. Barrett and Emmanuel quickly. That is something that they're going to look to do at the deadline. You expect Leon Rose and the Knicks front office to make a move at the deadline to get bench depth. But if they do that, this is a team that they've got the pieces in place. Very good defensively, and they've got 2 stars that can score. They've got 2 stars that can dish out the basketball, and they've obviously got Jalen Brunson, who out of those 2 stars with Julius Randle is obviously the number 1 and has been absolutely dominant. And you can make the case. He's coming off of a season last year where he was so good, putting up 24 points per game, 6 assists. This season, he's even better. He's averaging 26 and 6, shooting 47.5% from the field, 42% from three, which right now stands as a career high if the season were to end today. Brunson's only gotten better. And these guys are in their prime of their career. Brunson is in the prime of his career at 27 years old. Seeing that lob last night to Julius Randle late in that game showed you the potential. The Knicks are good. And the Knicks they're a fun, scrappy team. You know, Brunson, Randle are great, but other than that, they're not the biggest names. This isn't a super team. This isn't the Clippers with Paul George, Kawhi Leonard, and Russell Westbrook and James Harden. They're not the Clippers. They're not even the Lakers with LeBron and AD. Those guys aren't on the same, in terms of name, in terms of big names. That's Brunson and Randle aren't up there. They don't have the biggest stars, biggest, flashiest players in the world, but they're scrappy. They play together. They're well coached. They play good defense, and they take care of business. They're going to be a threat. They're certainly going to be a threat. And they play together. And that's something I think that's important, too. You look at a lot of teams that are out in the early rounds, they don't play together. They don't play good defense. The Knicks have good defense. So they're right now a 5 seed. Look, they took down Cleveland last year. You face Cleveland, let's say, again in the playoffs. I think you take them down again. Milwaukee just fired their coach, brought in Doc Rivers, which I don't understand why. You fire your coach when you're second in the Eastern Conference. Doesn't make sense unless if it's something behind the scenes that maybe something will come out. But, I mean, that's stupid. You're 30-13. You're 17 games above 500. You're firing your coach. And here the Nets are 17-26, not firing their coach. I mean, you got the Pistons at 4-39. So I guess it could be worse. There's some really bad NBA teams, by the way. And that's my biggest knock with the NBA, and I've said it for a while. National Blowout Association. On night in, night out basis, some of these games are way too uncompetitive. Way too uncompetitive. I mean, you got teams 40-plus games into the year. We're into January, and they've got 4 wins. You've got 3 teams left with still single-digit wins. That's pathetic. You also have a handful of teams on a night in, night out basis just losing by 30, losing by 40. Some of these games aren't even close. But the Knicks sit at 27-17, 7 games back of the 1 seed, a half game back of Cleveland, 3 games back of Philly, 3.5 back of Milwaukee for the 2. So, look, they can make some moves. I mean, they can get higher. I mean, they could possibly jump Cleveland. They could even maybe jump Philly at some point. If this Knicks team continues to roll, I think you're probably realistically will end up as a 4 seed and host the first round playoffs. Maybe they jump up to the 3, but Philly with Embiid dropping 7 the other night. Maxi's obviously been great. They seem like they figured things out. The biggest thing with them is getting it done in the postseason. It'll be interesting, but that's the Knicks' perspective. Now on to the Nets. And look, you go into this year as a Net fan, and you knew things weren't going to be great. We've talked about it. You knew it was going to be rough. You know, you don't have your big threes gone, or whatever you want to call it. The big 3 with Harden, Kyrie, KD was gone, and then it was the big 2 with like half of Ben Simmons, and then Kyrie was gone, then KD was gone, then it was just Ben Simmons, and now it's Mikal Bridges and Cam Johnson and still half of Ben Simmons who doesn't, I don't know what the guy, it must be so nice to be Ben Simmons. It really must be. I mean, you get paid millions of dollars and you don't do anything. It must be amazing. The guy doesn't do anything, and he's getting paid millions. He's stealing money from the Brooklyn Nets. 6 games this season from Ben Simmons. 6 whole games with a back. I don't even think he wants to play. I don't think he wants to play anymore, which at that point just retire. The sad part is with Ben Simmons, he was so good at one point with Philly and came here and, was a disaster. Been nothing short of a disaster. Doesn't play. Basically just sits the bench and collects a paycheck. But it's not about Ben Simmons because he had nothing to do with last night other than just sitting there watching the Nets collapse again, which I'm sure was great, and then he gets his paycheck at the end of it all. But how many more times can you watch this team? And through the years, a lot of my sports teams, I'll admit, have blown leads. Like, the Jets a couple years ago with Bowles were notoriously known for blowing leads. 2017 season, if games were 3 quarters, they would have been 11-5. They finished 5-11. There's been a lot of times, a lot of my teams over the years have been known for blowing leads. I mean, the Rangers this year are also known for blowing leads. Last night was another example where they get off to a 1-0, 2-0 start. They're also known for letting 2 goals in the matter of 1 minute and 4 seconds or 2 minutes. They allow goals in bunches, which is pathetic. We'll get to them here. But how many more times is this Brooklyn Nets team going to blow a lead in the fourth quarter? At some point, it's got to stop. And you hear the other day, last night, that Jacques Vaughn showed the tape to the guys on Tuesday, or when Monday, showed the tape to the guys of that Clippers loss and those Trailblazers losses and, even the Heat loss where the Nets had opportunities in that game and they lost 96-95. And many previous losses earlier in the season where the Nets blew games. And you go into last night, you get another opportunity, 9-point lead going into the fourth quarter against a really good Knicks team at home. And two things happen. Number one, Knicks fans take over your building. And number two, you blow another 9-point lead. You blow another lead in the fourth quarter. And also, you had an opportunity to win it, tie it late. Cam Johnson, how many more times are we going to see him miss a clutch three, miss a clutch shot late in the game? How many more times do we need to see that? And I like Cam Johnson. I thought he was a good piece. I don't think he's having the best year ever. I think he's been a little underwhelming, but how many more times are you going to miss a three late in the game? It's inexcusable. So last night wasn't the only case. As I said, for the national audience that got the rare chance to watch the Nets, last night was one of many that has happened just in this month. So you go back to a couple days ago, Sunday, Clippers-Nets. Nets had a massive lead on the Clippers. Massive. Looking good, looking like they're going to sweep the two LA teams. Okay, beat the Lakers, beat the Clippers, not so fast. They get outscored 41-15 in the third quarter. That's a 26-point difference. And they allowed a 22-0 run to end the game. As I said, it's on the top down. It's on everybody. Nets ended up losing that game 125-114. You go back 2 days earlier. They go and play the Trailblazers, also on the road in Portland. They lose 105-103. They get outscored 31-20 in the third quarter. They get outscored by 11, and they allowed Anthony Simmons to float a game winner with 0.2 seconds left. They also lost 96-95 to the Heat, where they got outscored by 1 and they went into overtime and lost that as well. So missed an opportunity to beat a good Heat team at home in overtime. They couldn't do it. And then you go even earlier in the month, Blazers in overtime. They get outscored 30-22 in the third, and they get outscored by 7 in overtime. So they get outscored by 8 in fourth, 7 in overtime. They lose that game in overtime by 7. So those are some of the blown losses, 5 of them. And the Knicks last night, they got outscored 32-18. That's 14 points in the fourth. And they lost, of course, 108-103. And at some point, I liked Jacques Vaughn at first. I thought, he kind of rallied the team a little bit. They were going through the really rough stretch with KD, took over in a tough spot, middle of the year with superstars that wanted out, clearly didn't want to be here. Took it, made the team competitive, got them to the playoffs last year, even with all the issues. You saw some good things out of Bridges. You saw like the team was developing. I think everybody kind of questioned his use of Cam Thomas and some out of the bench pieces. You go into this year like, all right, developmental year. Let's see if we can make the play in. See if he can continue to develop these young guys. A handful of them have gotten worse. I think his use of Cam Thomas is still questionable, but it kind of has gotten better. He's been used a lot more. I still think Cam Thomas, I still think Cam Thomas can be used more. But it's like at some point, yeah, Cam Johnson has missed a lot of shots. Yeah, their defense late is bad. At points, it's just a lot of times it's talent. This team is not loaded with talent. They're really not. They're just not. They don't have a legitimate star. I think Bridges is a star in the making. I wouldn't call him a star yet. I think Claxton's got some upside. Cam Johnson, I think, is taking a little bit of a step back. I think Cam Thomas as well is a monster. But the guy's still coming off the bench, mainly. And I wouldn't necessarily call him a star yet, coming into one. But a lot of it's talent. And we've always known about this team where defensively they can stop anybody. But the always biggest question was what they would be able to do offensively. And I have questions about both. Because late in these games, they don't do much offensively and defensively. Last night, defensively, was poor. And then some miscues on offense as well. But another guy I think that deserves some criticism, Spencer Dinwiddie. I mean, what exactly does he do? What exactly does Spencer Dinwiddie do for this team? I mean, really, let's be honest here. What exactly does Spencer Dinwiddie do for this team right now? Not much. Spencer Dinwiddie needs to be dealt. I think you need to look to deal Royce O'Neal. I think there's a handful of guys you need to look to deal. You can even make a case Dorian Finney-Smith. I think Dennis Smith Jr. has been really good this season. He's been really impressive, been a great addition to this bench, which I've been really happy about. He was a guy that I was actually kind of intrigued seeing him come over here when he was signed in the offseason. He's been really solid. Really good player, really good piece. Lonnie Walker at times been okay in and out of the lineup, of course, with injuries. But other than that, it's been a disgrace. And late game situation, it's on the players, but it's also as much as on the coach because they haven't been able to make the adjustments. So I definitely think, look, you're 17-26, you're 9 games below 500, you're out of the playoffs right now. You're out of the playoffs. Missing the playoffs in the NBA, missing at least the play-in the NBA, means you've got to be terrible. And the Nets are a terrible basketball team right now. So they'll look to bounce back tomorrow against the Timberwolves. They've got a little bit of a homestand going here. Timberwolves, Rockets, Jazz, Suns, all at home before they'll hit the road for one game against the Sixers. Then they'll come back home for a 5-game homestand against the Warriors, Mavericks, Cavs, Spurs, and the Celtics. So a home stretch here, home cooking for the Nets, but don't have a lot of optimism. So you move on to the Rangers. And, of course, I've talked about the Rangers a lot. Have a podcast talking Rangers. If you want to check that out, definitely go do so. The Rangers started the season. We're hot. We're rolling. Recently, they've hit a massive bump. And I'll be honest, there's definitely some concerns about this team. You go into this West Coast road trip. Things were looking, they had a 4-game losing streak where they lost to the Canucks, Blues, Capitals twice. Canadians, Canucks, Blues, and Capitals. And then they bounced back, beat the Capitals, beat the Kraken last week. And then you went into this West Coast road trip where you had games against the Vegas Golden Knights, the LA Kings, the Ducks, and the Sharks. Knights and Kings were back-to-back on Friday and Saturday. Kings and Ducks were back-to-back on Saturday and Sunday. Sharks were obviously last night. So you go into these games. Ducks aren't very good. Sharks aren't very good. The Kings going into this game on Saturday were struggling. Vegas is good. Still missing some pieces. No Eichel. Just got Aiden Hill, their goalie, back last night. And they obviously won over the Islanders, which we'll get to here in a second. But you go into this road trip and you think to yourself, all right, I predicted you go 3-1. I say you probably split against Vegas and LA, and you should be able to beat the Ducks, Sharks, and then you split that game against Vegas. Or split that Vegas Kings games. Go 1-1 in those games, beat the Ducks, beat the Sharks. Or you beat Vegas and you split the back-to-back, or you just go 2-2. Maybe you lose to the Golden Knights. I thought they were going to lose to the Golden Knights. It just felt like that. And then you split the back-to-back, but you beat San Jose. Like, San Jose and Anaheim were must-wins. Like, they were must-wins, but they were can't-lose. Like, you should win those games. They beat Anaheim. They lose to San Jose. Last night was pathetic. Pathetic. You have a 2-0 lead against the San Jose Sharks, who coming out of the game are 13-31-4. The Sharks are embarrassing. They are not as bad as they were earlier in the year, but they're still basically an expansion team. They're tied for last in the NHL, which the Chicago Blackhawks in points with 30. I think many people can agree they are the worst team in the NHL. You have a 2-0 lead going into the third period. Fox and Panarin both score. First period was Fox. Second period was Panarin. Panarin with 29 goals on the year has been a monster. You go into the third period, 2-0 lead, and you blow it. And you blow it in a span of a little over 2 minutes. To be exact, 2 minutes and 8 seconds, you blew. 2 goals in 2 minutes and 8 seconds. The Rangers this season have had so many times where they have 1-goal lead, 2-goal leads, and they let the lead go in a matter of a minute. Or there's been times, too, where they'll let up a goal and then they'll take a dumb penalty 10 seconds later and they'll cover it up by getting a stop on the penalty kill. But eventually those are going to come back to bite you. I've always said it all year long with the Rangers. There's been two big pet peeves I've had. Number one, they don't start fast. A lot of these games they trail early on. I mean, it took them 5 straight goals to beat the Anaheim Ducks. Last night was a rare case where they scored early. Many of these games, they don't score early on. They fall down 1-2-0. And that's great and all when you're winning and coming back. Oh, no quit. This is great. We're coming back. But when you're not coming back, those early struggles rear its ugly head fast. Real fast. And number two, it's allowing these goals and these bad mistakes in the short amount of time. This season, the Rangers have had many times where they allow a goal. All right, minute later, another goal. Or I always go back to a sequence they had against the Capitals. They were up 1-0, I want to say it was, or 2-0, whatever it was, or maybe 3, I don't know. It was something. It was the game right out of the winter break where they beat them. I think it was 5-1. They ended up winning the game, but this was a case where they covered it up. Capitals scored. Rangers, like 5 seconds later, right off the faceoff, got a penalty. And the Capitals are right on the power play. Now, they ended up going on to win that game. That got covered up. But that's not going to last. You're not going to be able to win that game. That's not sustainable. Hurting yourselves, allowing 2 goals in a span of 2 minutes or 30 seconds is ridiculous. You blow leads so easy. This team have blown so many leads this year. They've blown games. They've had to come back in so many games. They have fell down 2-0 in games, have had to come all the way back. Some of those games they've won, some of those games they lost. When the playoffs roll around, you can't do that. And that's the brand of hockey the Rangers have played. And I don't want to take it all away from them because, look, they still are in first place. And I know fans don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. But it's not like this team's in last. They're 29-15-3. They're 61 points. Luckily, the Flyers have lost 3 straight. So they've got a 5-point lead on the Flyers with a game in hand. Luckily, the Flyers kept winning, this team would be looking up right now at the Flyers. Instead, that's not the case. But this needs to change. Because guess what? You got Vegas on Friday, which isn't going to be easy. You just lost to them 5-1. Will be exactly 1 day and a week from Friday. And then you also face Ottawa, who you lost to earlier in the season. And Ottawa is one of the hottest teams in the NHL right now. Or one of the hotter teams. They've won 2 straight, but they've played well. They're winning some games. And you get them as well. And you lost to them in Ottawa. You get them again in Ottawa. And this team just lost to San Jose. Just lost. So it's not crazy to say they could lose those 2 games right now. My point is this. You got to find a way to split one of those games. Those feel like can't loses. Like last night was a can't lose. Meaning if you lose, everything just breaks out. And it's happening. Here I am ranting about a team that's won 29 games, which I didn't think I'd be doing. But going into the All-Star break, you feel like you at least need to win one of those games. You can't lose both those games going to the All-Star break on a 3-game losing streak, losing games to the Senators and the Sharks. Pathetic. 2024 has not been good for the Rangers. They are 4-6-2, 4-8 overall. Power play just a little over 15% since the start of 2024. Got blown out by Vegas, missing 9 players, losing to the struggling Kings, barely beat the Ducks, lost to the Sharks, who are last in the NHL, all those things. So this team's got some problems. I think Mika's got to play a lot better. I think defensively they've got to play better at times. I think goalies, a lot of times, or got to be better. It's an issue. You know, you want to switch up the lines. I think the lines could be possible. You look at it, maybe a switch up of a line could be Panarin, Zibanejad, Will Cooley on the first line instead of Panarin, or instead of Kreider, Mika, Kakko. There's just not much scoring. Kreider and Mika just does not work, and Mika's struggling. Lafreniere, Trocheck, Kakko, Kreider, Brzezinski, Wheeler, and then you can go VZ, Gaudreau, and a mixture of Pitlick or Bonino. You're going to need to trade for somebody. You're going to need a winger. Move Kreider down, to the third. Bump, keep that second line potentially in check, or you can move Panarin up to the first. like I just mentioned. I like this second line a lot, but that's been one of the biggest issues with this Ranger team is when their second line doesn't produce, they lose games. And we've said that during the winning streak, but, it kind of gets lost in the mix because they're winning. Now that they're losing, it's starting to rear its ugly head, as I mentioned, with the blowing leads and coming back in games. So, Rangers got some work to do. Look, the season's not over. They're in the playoffs. And I think it'd take a colossal collapse for them to miss the playoffs. But this team keeps losing, playoffs or how deep we're going to go in the playoffs, I think our expectations earlier in the year were kind of low. How would this team be? New coach, not much additions. They exceeded our expectations earlier in the year. Now they're kind of come back down to earth, and it's a problem. As for the Islanders, things are looking up for the Islanders. Hire Patrick Roy. I think a lot of people on Long Island really like it. I like this move from an outsider. Lane Lambert was a disaster. Team was losing. Team was also blowing games. Defensively weren't great. I think they needed a guy, I believe it was Barzell, who said, that they weren't playing with much energy. There wasn't much structure. Kind of if you read between the lines, it was a lot of, wasn't much structure, wasn't much energy, wasn't much organization. It was just a lot of bad. Patrick Roy is going to come in here. He's going to put a culture in place. He's going to hold guys accountable. Accountability's big. We all have seen his bench rants where he's yelling at guys. And I also think he's going to kind of run a no-nonsense type of culture where you're going to have to have some thick skin to play for him. And you've already seen some of the benefits. I mean, I know they lost last night, and it's early. But they did win obviously his first game with the team. And, I think he mentioned it in his first day of practice about it's playoffs from here on out. And I think that's their mindset. They realize that they're walking on thin ice. Their playoff chances are not in a great spot. They're not primed for a playoff spot. Right now they've got 51 points. When you look at the wild card, they are 2 points out of a wild card on Detroit. They're also there with the Devils as well, both at 51 points. So they're going to have to play almost perfect hockey from here on out to get in. They can't afford another 4 or 5 game losing streak or another stretch in 10 games where they go 2-7-1 or 3-6-1 like the stretch that they're on right now. They can't afford that. They're going to have to stay above water. 6-4, 6-3-1 or 6-3-2 stretches, like those type of stretches, or 6-4 stretches. Like, you're going to have to play above 500 hockey. You're going to have to play really good hockey over the next couple of games. And I think, or over the next couple of months here. And I think something that's also intriguing about him is the possibility of him working with both Varlamov, who's off IR, and Ilya Sorokin, who hasn't had the best seasons, have had a little bit of a down year, but an all-time great goaltender. Working with those two guys, I think, is really good. This team needed some structure, needed a culture. It was badly in place with Lane Lambert, long overdue. I think the players feel it. I think there's going to be a little bit more energy, a little bit more intensity, and I think it happened at a good time going into the All-Star break, because I think going into the All-Star break, they'll be able to catch their breath a little bit. It's kind of a hectic time right now for the Islanders and for Patrick Roy and all of the coaching staff, but they've got 2 more games left before the All-Star break. After the All-Star break, that's where all the playoff hockey really begins. That's where you got to find your groove. And you come out of the All-Star break facing some good teams. You got the Maple Leafs. You got the Lightning. Kraken, who are kind of on their level. You've also got the Rangers after that. So they get out of the All-Star break with a couple good opportunities to take advantage against some teams in front of them. So that'll do it. Unfortunately, not a whole lot of winning for my teams last night. Hopefully, a little bit more here in the coming days. We'll have more content coming your way, as always, here on the channel. Enjoy doing these. Enjoy talking all things sports. Leave a comment down below. What are your thoughts on the Nets, the Knicks, the Rangers, Islanders? Any other thoughts you've got, leave them in the comment section down below. Appreciate all the support. As always, please like and subscribe. Share the video if you're new, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.